Editorial of Thunderbolt Library. The greatest mysteries in the physical world are dark matter and dark energy. Approximately 96% of the universe's mass energy composition consists of dark matter and dark energy, yet their essence remains entirely unknown to humanity. Similarly, in humanities, there exists a phenomenon existence similar to dark matter and dark energy. We can name and classify it, but its true nature is almost entirely elusive. I refer to this discipline as sinology. An Iranian scholar said, once described the paradigm of Western humanities research on the Near East as Orientalism. Similarly, there is an overwhelming body of research on Chinese topics to date. However, the world behind the Chinese people remains largely unexplained. The analogy with dark matter and dark energy is not an exaggeration. Therefore, establishing a field of sinology should be an urgent task for the humanities. Said Orientalism, rooted in a post-colonial stance, draws upon Foucault's theory that discourse is an extension of political power. Said argues that the so-called image of Oriental knowledge is a construct of Western hegemony. The Western world not only assigned the Orient a logical proper name, but also imbued it with a complete set of connotations. Through this process, the Orient was incorporated into the political, cultural, and economic framework of the West. Said points out that the knowledge system of Orientalism served the purpose of colonial domination, portraying the Orient as an entity needing to be managed, tamed, and civilized. I won't rush to judge whether Said's theory is right or wrong. However, his indiscriminate categorization of Chinese studies as merely a byproduct of Orientalism seems to overstep its bounds. The trajectory of Chinese humanities research differs fundamentally from that of the Middle East or Near East. Its path has alternated between moments of brilliance and descents into darkness, remaining enigmatic to this day. In the 18th century, thinkers like Voltaire and Leibniz viewed China as a paradise and sacred land. Even today, some Chinese occasionally draw on their fleeting and superficial observations to bolster their confidence and morale. However, who could have foreseen that by the late 18th century, Voltaire would completely change his stance? He began to harshly criticize China's autocratic politics and religious beliefs, particularly folk practices and superstitions. Leibniz, too, shifted his position, adopting a European rationalist perspective to sternly condemn the severe deficiencies in Chinese science and philosophy, which he believed hindered the development of civilization. Nearly every prominent scholar with significant contributions to the humanities has delivered incisive critiques of China's institutions and scholarship. Montesquieu and David Hume, for instance, pointed out that the suppression of freedom and human nature in China led to its civilizational stagnation. Adam Smith particularly criticized the lack of market freedom in the wealth of nations, using concrete examples to explain how this led to economic stagnation. Jean-Jacques Rousseau focused his critique more on the political and social dimensions of China. In The Social Contract, he argued that China's autocracy sacrificed individual freedom. As for the assessments of 19th century philosophers of history such as Hegel, Schelling, and Herder, these are already well known to us. Their unequivocal and compelling scholarly records have firmly conveyed to the world that Western thinkers had long moved beyond the naive reverence for China's supposed mystique. They broke through the illusion of the monk from afar chanting better sutras, firmly establishing a more critical and independent view. The most representative instance of face-to-face interaction between Westerners and Chinese was the late 18th century visit of British envoy Lord Macartney to China. He fully experienced the arrogance and intransigence of Emperor Qianlong. Through the two opium wars in 19th century and the Boxer Rebellion at the century's end, Westerners are supposed to be awakened by acts of treachery and dishonesty on the part of the Chinese. However, in the 20th century, China's adoption of Marxism dramatically altered the Western perspective. The deep entrenchment of utopian ideologies was not unique to China and Soviet Russia. Many in the Western world fell for them as well. Even the Korean War of the 1950s, which brought American and Chinese forces into direct conflict, failed to eradicate the lingering admiration for figures like Mao Zedong and Marx among some Americans. Philip Short's Mao, A Life and Ezra Vogel's Deng Xiaoping, and the transformation of China are both suspected of overpraising. And of course, Edgar Snow's Red Star over China romanticized and popularized a group of what were, in essence, bandits during their Yin years. The dark matter and dark energy of Chinese culture once again began poisoning humanity. When Deng Xiaoping advocated his hide your strength, bide your time reforms, the United States responded with goodwill, going to great lengths to bring China into the World Trade Organization. This opened the floodgates for a regime whose nature was fundamentally malevolent, with a naive hope that economic prosperity would naturally lead China toward the inclusive institutions described by Semiglu. What the U.S. received instead was the ferocious assault of a post-Orwellian totalitarian regime. Even at this point, many still believe the issue lies solely in political systems, assuming that once this political veil is lifted, everything will fall into place. Such a simplistic view stems from the Christian civilization's strategy of supporting the weak. But now that the Christian civilization paradigm has evolved into that of the strong, other feeble and dying political forces will not voluntarily emerge from their mire of barbarity, ignorance, and obstinacy. As Elon Musk aptly stated, when civilization defeats barbarism, it leaves room for barbarism to survive, but when barbarism triumphs over civilization, it eradicates civilization entirely. This statement demonstrates that today's Christian civilization has reached a historical stage where it must transform its paradigm. Former President Trump's policies reflect this shift and represent a step in the right direction. However, for China, its choice of political system is far more than a question of organizational form. The deepest rooted issue lies in the cultural deficiencies embedded in the depths of the Chinese psyche. In this regard, the world has already made strides. Scholars like Francis Fukuyama, Darren Asimoglu, and William T. Rowe have made brilliant contributions through their research. As a modest independent media platform, we also aspire to contribute to this field, even if only by adding a few bricks to the edifice. To this end, we have launched a small column, naming it Thunderbolt Library. We hope it brings you both knowledge and joy, as well as the courage to transform a rebellious spirit into great actions on the path toward a new journey of civilization.